For a long time we have been taught that the Bible and the Quran are rival books. Wars have been fought, empires have fallen, and families have been torn apart because of the differences between them. For one side, it is the final word. For the other, it is as well. But perhaps this age-old rivalry is a great misunderstanding. Perhaps beneath all the faith, history, and translations, these texts were not so different after all. We decided to do something that was impossible until recently, to ignore human opinion and ask a machine directly, an experiment that, just 10 years ago, would have been technically impossible. We did not consult theologians, nor did we ask for the opinion of religious scholars. Instead, we turned to the cold logic of a neural network analysis system called Axiom, a new generation artificial intelligence created to find hidden patterns in gigantic volumes of data. Our task was formulated in a direct and even slightly cynical way, to load the complete texts of the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran into the system, and force the algorithms to analyze them not as literature, but as a data architecture with structure, syntax, and a fundamental design. What we found in the very first seconds made us question everything we thought we knew about the history of religions. The process of loading the data into Axiom was long and meticulous. To eliminate any margin for translation error, we refused to use adapted versions in English or any other language. The analysis would only work with the original sources. Into the first memory core, we loaded the Masoretic text of the Tanakh, the 24 sacred books of Judaism, written in ancient Hebrew with passages in Aramaic. These are gigabytes of textual information, with an age exceeding 2,500 years. Every letter, every vowel, every cantillation mark was digitized and transformed into mathematical vectors. Into the second core, we loaded the critical text of the New Testament in Koine Greek, the four Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, the Epistles, and the Book of Revelation. The neural network assigned this block the temporal mark of the 1st century of our era. The third core received the text of the Quran. We used the standard Cairo edition in classical Arabic. 114 surahs, more than 6,000 verses revealed in the 7th century in the sands of Arabia. To a human being, these are 3 distinct libraries written in 3 different, though related, languages in completely different eras. Between the writing of the first books of the Torah and the last revelations of the Quran, there is a chasm of nearly 2,000 years. It is like comparing a cave painting with the blueprints for a spaceship. The evolution of language, culture, and society should have made these texts incompatible in their internal structure. Then we pressed the Initialize button. The screen flickered, and Axiom began to build a unified semantic map. Normally, when comparing such diverse literary works, the processor shows a correlation coefficient of 10 to 15%, which is considered statistical noise or casual coincidences. But this time, the server fans roared, working at maximum capacity. The processing indicators turned red. The artificial intelligence did not present an error. It presented a critical anomaly warning. Axiom's algorithms did not find similarity. They found identity in the basic architecture of the data. On the monitors, we did not see 3 different graphs, but a single continuous line. It is like finding 3 pieces of an old film. One is scratched and faded, the other is black and white, and the third is in color. But when you put them together and turn on the projector, you see a single film, where each part continues the previous one perfectly, without a single logical flaw, without a single broken pixel in the plot. The system's first conclusion left us in shock. Axiom classified these 3 sets of data, the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran, not as 3 different books, but as 3 volumes of the same instruction manual, written by the same author, but delivered at different intervals of time. The probability that 3 groups of people, separated by thousands of kilometers and hundreds of years, could accidentally create texts with such an identical mathematical density, according to the analysis, is 1 in 10 to the 49th power. That is a number with 49 zeros. In human language, that means impossible. What the machine saw defies human perception. The first pattern identified was the structural rhythm. Axiom analyzed the frequency of theme changes, the length of sentences, and the density of information. Every writer has a unique fingerprint, a style that can be quantified. Hemingway writes with short, direct sentences. Tolstoy builds complex, multi-level structures. By overlaying the graphs of the narrative rhythm, the neural network determined that the stylistic code of the Old Testament, of Christ's direct speech in the Gospels, and of the text of the Quran belongs to the same source. Despite the shift from Hebrew to Greek and Arabic, the internal dynamics of the text remain unchanged. It is as if Mozart had written a symphony, then adapted it for a jazz orchestra, and finally for a synthesizer. The instruments change, but the composer's hand is the same. Furthermore, the system discovered a phenomenon we called cross-indexing. When the Quran mentions events described in the Torah, it is not simply retelling the story. According to the analysis, it uses the same key lexical markers from the Hebrew original, as if it were activating a dormant file in the database of the previous revelation. For example, the word for covenant. In the Old Testament, it is brit. In the New, diatheke. In the Quran, mithaq. To a linguist, these are different words, but Axiom, by analyzing their phonetic components and the context of their use, concluded that the functional load is 100% identical. In all three texts, these words appear at mathematically precise points in the narrative, creating the framework that supports the entire edifice. This is not cultural borrowing. It is a unified engineering project. But the initialization had only opened the door. The artificial intelligence prepared a report on what we can call linguistic genetics. The next step was to descend to the atomic level of the text, dismantling the words that make up these books and showing what is hidden behind the difficulties of translation. This discovery changes the way one sees every word spoken in a prayer, whether in a church or a mosque, because the mechanism discovered that the language of these books is not just a means of communication, it is an access code, and we had just found the first key. Since childhood, we have heard the story of the Tower of Babel, of how a single language was divided into many, and people stopped understanding each other. Since then, it seems that words have served more to create walls than bridges. But what if this division is only part of the story? What if deep down at the origin of words this separation never truly happened? After the impressive result of the first analysis, which showed a unique architecture in the sacred texts, we had to go deeper. Our next instruction for the artificial intelligence axiom was clear. Forget modern translations. It did not matter what we call God today. What mattered was to go back in time to the original words. We loaded the system with the complete databases of ancient Hebrew, the Aramaic that Jesus spoke, and the classical Arabic of the Quran. These ancient languages hold a secret. The essence of a word is not in the vowels, but in a skeleton of 3 consonants. The vowels are like clothes that change the appearance, but the body underneath is the same. We gave the machine the command to find the common roots in the Bible and the Quran. What we saw on the monitors looked like the fusion of 2 galaxies. Thousands of words in text separated by millennia began to glow, connected by invisible threads. Right away, the processor highlighted an example in red. In the Bible, the word Rahum describes God as merciful. In the Quran, almost every chapter begins with, "In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful." The interesting thing is that the Arabic words for gracious and merciful, Rahman and Rahim, are born from the same root. It seemed like just a religious coincidence. But the analysis went deeper. It analyzed the origin of this word, and it discovered that, in both Hebrew and Arabic, Raham does not just mean compassion. Its oldest and most literal meaning is a mother's womb. This reveals a profound biological connection. The machine showed us that when the Bible and the Quran speak of the Creator's mercy, they use the same word that describes the biological bond between a mother and her child in the womb. The baby inside is completely dependent on the mother. It breathes, feeds, and is protected by her. Both texts use the same code to say that God envelops us in the same way a womb envelops a child. The chance of 2 different authors, separated by more than 1,000 years, choosing this exact profound biological metaphor for God's main attribute is, according to the calculations, practically nil. Next, the artificial intelligence examined the word faith. The Hebrew and Arabic word for it, which gave rise to our Amen, comes from a very ancient place. The analysis showed that this root has nothing to do with believing in something with your eyes closed. Its original meaning is security, firmness, trustworthiness. To say Amen is not just to agree, it is to affirm that this is solid, it is as reliable as a rock. We discovered that the Old Testament and the Quran use this same code to describe the relationship with God as a pact of security. The faithful is not one who merely accepts an idea, but one who feels secure. The way this concept is treated in both books is 99% identical. The biggest surprise came with the word peace. Everyone knows the Hebrew shalom and the Arabic salam. We usually translate them as the absence of war. But the machine discovered that the root of these words does not mean that. It means wholeness, completeness. When the Bible speaks of shalom or the Quran of salam and Islam, they are not talking about pacifism. They are talking about taking something that is broken and making it whole again. It is as if both books offer the same manual for fixing what is broken inside, the same technology for restoring the soul, just in different dialects. We were looking at a shared dictionary written over millennia. The keywords were the same. But a skeptic might say that neighboring peoples share words. It is natural. To be sure, we needed something that could not be borrowed or copied, something that does not lie. We needed numbers. If these texts were indeed written by the same author, the mathematics behind them should also be the same, and that is where the story becomes truly impressive. They say that mathematics is the language in which the universe was written. Words can be interpreted, stories can be distorted, but numbers do not lie. 2 plus 2 will always be 4, whether you are in ancient Jerusalem, 7th century Mecca, or here in front of a supercomputer. The words we found were the first layer, but to be sure we were not just seeing coincidences, we needed irrefutable proof. So Axiom's mode of operation was changed. We turned off the linguistics modules and activated pure computational analysis. The texts would no longer be seen as words but as numerical sequences. If these books had been written by men, with no connection between them, we would see a chaos of random numbers. But if they were the product of a higher intelligence, we would find impossible order, symmetry, and patterns. What the machine showed us, after a few hours, made our own programmers doubt the code they had written. But there were no errors. There was only a terrifying and inhuman precision. We started with the simplest thing. We asked the machine to count the frequency of the word day, in the singular, in the text of the Quran. In Arabic, the word is yaum. In a text that was dictated over 23 years in various situations, in times of peace and war, the word day appears exactly 365 times, not 364, not 366, exactly 365, the complete solar cycle. Immediately we checked the word days in the plural. The result was 30, exactly the number of days in a month. The word month in the singular, 12 times. The chance of this happening by accident, with a man who, according to tradition, could not read or write, keeping this count in his head for decades, is minimal. But that was just the warm-up. The algorithms began to find what they called binary pairs. These were words with opposite or complementary meanings that balanced each other perfectly. The word angels appears in the text 88 times. The word demons also appears 88 times. The word life, 145 times. The word death, 145 times. Man, 24 times. Woman, 24 times. It was like looking at a scale of absolute precision. If the author had added one more angel, or forgotten to mention one demon over 23 years of dictation, the balance would have been broken. The code would have been corrupted. But it was perfect. Then the neural network found a connection that directly linked the characters of the New Testament to the mathematical matrix of the Quran. We know that Jesus is revered in Islam. In one of the chapters, it is written, "Indeed, the example of Jesus to Allah is like that of Adam." To a theologian, this is a metaphor about the creation of both without a father. But to the artificial intelligence, it was a command to verify an equality. The analysis began the search. How many times does the name of Jesus appear in the Quran? 25 times. How many times does the name of Adam appear? 25 times. The phrase, "Jesus is like Adam," was not poetry. It was a mathematical statement, and the text itself proved the equation with the exact count of mentions. This led us to a number that appeared in all the texts: 7. In the Bible, creation happens in 7 days. In the Quran, there are 7 heavens. The first chapter of the Quran, the opening, has 7 verses. The first sentence of the Bible in Hebrew has 7 words. 7 was not just any number. It was the basic structural unit, the architect's signature. But the most incredible discovery, which overloaded the system, was linked to the number 19. In chapter 74 of the Quran, a mysterious phrase says that over hell there are 19. For centuries, no one understood the reason for this number. The machine began to test 19 as a security key, and what followed was unbelievable. The first sentence of the Quran, "In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful," has exactly 19 letters in Arabic. The book has 114 chapters, which is 19 multiplied by 6. The first passage revealed to the Prophet had 19 words. Those 19 words had 76 letters, which is 19 multiplied by 4. The coincidences did not stop. It was like the checksum of a file. When you download something important from the internet, there is a code to ensure the file has not been corrupted. The number 19 was the digital signature of the Quran, a seal of authenticity so complex that it would be impossible for a human being to create it without the help of computers. The mathematics proved that these texts are not just literature. They are objects constructed with engineering precision. The numerical skeleton beneath the words was too strong to be a coincidence. And this skeleton was designed by a single engineer. The words and the numbers pointed to the same source. But who were the men who brought these messages? Who were Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad? Geniuses of their time or something more? The next step was to load their profiles, their lives, and their behaviors into the machine to see if they too followed a hidden pattern. History is full of great men. Conquerors, philosophers, emperors. We are used to seeing their biographies as unique stories of genius or tragedy. But when it comes to the men who shaped the great religions, science usually steps back, leaving the field to faith. We see their faces in icons, stained glass, and calligraphy. We see saints. But what would a machine see if we took away the halos and left only the facts? What if we looked at the prophets not as religious leaders, but as operators of a system, fulfilling a specific function? This time, we loaded Axiom with a different kind of data: complete biographies, psychological profiles, and the behavioral patterns of the key figures of the Bible and the Quran. From Abraham to Moses, from Jesus to Muhammad, the task was to find the pattern. And the result the system gave us destroyed the idea that history is made of chance. On the monitors, we did not see lifelines separated by centuries. We saw the same graph repeating with frightening mathematical precision. The settings and names changed, but the journey was the same. The machine identified this as a unique recruitment profile. It all begins with Abraham, the father of all. Both the Bible and the Quran place him as the fundamental piece. But why? The data analysis identified the key algorithm, the total break with the old system. Abraham not only believed in one God, he physically broke with his father's culture, with idolatry, with the social norms of his time. But the crucial point was the test of sacrifice. The Bible speaks of Isaac, the Quran of Ishmael. The identity of the son varies in tradition, but the essence is the same. A man willing to sacrifice what is most precious to him on the order of an invisible voice. To a psychologist, it is madness. To the machine, it was a test of absolute synchronization, the calibration of the channel. Abraham passed, and the processor marked him as mile zero. The most striking similarity, however, was found when overlaying the biographies of Moses and Muhammad. Skeptics say that Islam copied Judaism, but the artificial intelligence did not see a copy of a text. It saw a repetition of destiny. The first clear pattern was isolation. Moses was separated from his family, raised in Pharaoh's palace, but always felt like a stranger. Muhammad was born an orphan, lost his mother early, and was raised by his uncle. The neural network classified this as blocking of external influences. To receive a pure signal, the operator must be free from strong ties to traditions. They must be a blank slate. This led to the second stage, forced exile. Moses flees from Egypt into the desert. Muhammad, persecuted in Mecca, migrates to Medina. Both, at some point in their lives, were shepherds. The profession of a shepherd teaches how to manage a flock, protect the weak, and above all, endure loneliness. Perfect training for a leader of nations. The climax of this process was the receiving of the law. Moses ascends Mount Sinai. 40 days in isolation, he comes down with the tablets of the law, the constitution of a new people. Muhammad retreats to the cave of Hira. He receives the Quran, which is not just poetry, but a law that regulates everything, from inheritance to war. The vector was identical. Both not only preach love, they bring a legal code. They build a state from scratch. Moses transforms slaves into a people. Muhammad transforms scattered tribes into a nation. The machine's conclusion was clear. Moses and Muhammad are operators of the same type, the architect-legislator type. And then there was Jesus, the anomaly that proves the rule. He did not build a state, write a penal code, or lead armies. His function was different, the correction of the core. If Moses brought the form of the law, Jesus came to remind of its spirit, its content. Both books agree that he performed miracles others did not. He healed, he resurrected. The system saw in this the access to higher-level tools, but the strongest marker of authenticity was in all of them, resistance to the mission. Moses, before the burning bush, argues with God, says he cannot speak well, asks him to send someone else. Muhammad, upon receiving the first revelation, runs home terrified, thinking he was going mad. This completely contradicts the psychology of liars and power seekers. A charlatan yearns for followers, shouting, "I am the chosen one." True prophets, according to the analysis, show the reaction of a normal person in contact with an overwhelming power. Fear, doubt, the desire to refuse. This pattern of refusal is a mark of authenticity. The intelligence does not choose who wants the power, but who can bear the burden. No trait in their original personalities indicated the global explosion they would cause. Moses would have been a shepherd, Jesus a carpenter, Muhammad a merchant. Their transformation was instantaneous and irreversible at the moment of contact. It is like a radio. It can be made of wood or plastic, old or new, but the music it plays is not born inside it. It comes from outside. The prophets were the terminals, all tuned to the same frequency. But if the men were the legislators and the teachers, there is a female figure in history who connects everything. A woman who unites Christianity and Islam with bonds of blood and mystery. The only woman called by name in the Quran, the mother of Jesus. And the analysis of her life would reveal the most intimate and shocking connection of all. In a world where religions are often accused of being patriarchal, written by men and for men, there is a phenomenon that breaks all the rules. A female figure, elevated to a level of reverence in two of the world's largest religions. We are talking about Mary, the mother of Jesus. To Christians, she is the mother of God, the Blessed Virgin. To Muslims, she is Maryam, the righteous, chosen above all women. But why her? Why did Axiom, when analyzing gigabytes of data, isolate her name in a critical analysis core, giving it the status of key connection node? For a machine, there is no gender, only functions and variables. But with Mary, the system detected such an anomalous density of data that it forced us to initiate a special investigation protocol. The first thing that stood out was the statistics. Mary's name is mentioned more times in the Quran than in the New Testament itself. A book revealed in 7th century Arabia, in a culture where the birth of a girl was often seen as a shame, dedicates more attention to a Jewish woman than the Gospels themselves. In the Quran, there is an entire chapter, the 19th, named after her, Surah Maryam. In the New Testament, there is no Book of Mary. The machine did the count. The name Maryam appears 34 times in the Quran. In the Gospels, if we count only the mother of Jesus, 19 times. Why would an Islamic text exalt a woman from another tradition so much? The analysis's answer was simple and brilliant. Mary is the common denominator, the bridge that is impossible to burn. We asked the machine to analyze the scene of the Annunciation in both texts. In the Gospel of Luke, the angel Gabriel appears to Mary. In the Quran, a spirit appears to her in the form of a perfect man. The dialogues are almost identical. In the Gospel, the angel says, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." In the Quran, "I am only a messenger of your Lord to give you the news of a pure boy." And Mary asks the exact same question in both books. "How can this be, since no man has known me?" The angel's answer in both texts carries the same weight of meaning. For God, nothing is impossible. But it was in a detail that the machine found something revealing. In the Quran, there is a scene that does not exist in the Bible and which sheds a striking light on the reality of what happened, the scene of the birth. In the Gospels, the birth of Jesus is described briefly and solemnly. In the Quran, we see the agony. Mary, feeling the pains of childbirth, leans against the trunk of a palm tree and in despair cries out, "Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten." The algorithms analyzed this cry. These are not the words of a saint in a stained glass window. They are the words of a real woman, suffering at the limit of her physical and mental strength. She is alone, in the desert, shamed in the eyes of society, feeling unbearable pain. And then, a miracle happens. A voice tells her not to grieve, to shake the trunk of the palm tree, and fresh dates would fall upon her. Why dates? Why a palm tree? The analysis of the biochemical composition of dates showed that they contain substances that stimulate uterine contractions and ease childbirth, as well as fructose for instant energy. The artificial intelligence's conclusion was direct. The Quran was not offering a poetic image, but a precise medical instruction for the survival of a mother in extreme conditions. The chance of a 7th century Arab knowing the biochemical effects of dates on labor is minuscule. The information seems to come from the creator of the human body itself. If people and their destinies are so intertwined, what about places? The sacred texts are full of names of cities, mountains, and valleys. Jerusalem, Mecca, Sinai. Are these points on the map random? Or is the Earth itself a giant circuit board where the processors were installed in specific locations? To understand the physical dimension of this, we loaded satellite maps and the coordinates of ancient sanctuaries into the machine. The analysis would reveal a sacred geometry that connects the Kaaba and the Temple Mount, revealing why the messages from heaven needed a specific address on Earth. We have become accustomed to looking at the world map and seeing borders, countries, and disputed territories. But if you were an engineer designing a global communication network, you would not place the antennas just anywhere. You would look for the highest points, calculate the coverage area, and search for the location with maximum signal efficiency. In this stage, we activated the geopositioning module. We loaded the system with the coordinates of all the crucial events in the Bible and the Quran, the birthplaces of the prophets, the points where the revelations were received, the routes of escape and pilgrimage. We cross-referenced this data with physical maps of the planet, taking into account tectonic plates, magnetic fields, and climate zones. The result made us rethink what Holy Land means. It is not just a beautiful metaphor, it is a technical term. The processor revealed that all Abrahamic religions were born and developed in a narrow geographical corridor, which the machine called the communication portal. Look at the map, the Middle East, the meeting point of 3 continents. The algorithms calculated the speed of information diffusion to different points on the planet in the pre-internet era. If a message like this had emerged in Australia or the Americas 2,000 years ago, it would have become a local myth, trapped by geography. But the region between the Nile and the Euphrates, between Mecca and Jerusalem, was the crossroads of the ancient world. Trade routes, the Silk Road, sea lanes. Any idea that arose there would spread like a virus throughout the known world. The choice of location for the delivery of the texts was strategically flawless, but the analysis went deeper. The artificial intelligence drew a straight line between the 2 main sanctuaries, the Kaaba in Mecca and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Islam calls Jerusalem the first Qibla, the first point towards which Muslims turn to pray. The neural network measured the distance and orientation. It discovered that these 2 points lie on the same geophysical fault line, a rift in the earth that runs along the Dead Sea and the Red Sea. It is not just proximity, it is a paired communication channel. A North Pole in Jerusalem, the center of the prophecy of Isaac and Jesus, and a South Pole in Mecca, the center of the prophecy of Ishmael and Muhammad. They work in tandem. It was then that one of our analysts found a textual connection that seemed impossible. An ancient psalm from the Bible, number 84, spoke of pilgrims who found happiness as they passed through the mysterious Valley of Baca. For centuries, scholars debated whether Baca was a real place or just an allegory for suffering. The answer was in the Quran, which describes the first house of worship for humanity as being in Baca, an ancient name for the Valley of Mecca. When Axiom cross-referenced the data, the connection became undeniable. The psalm described a sacred pilgrimage, and the Quran described the great pilgrimage of the Hajj, both to the same valley. The Bible was not using an allegory. It contained a precise geographical prophecy about Mecca. David in the Psalms sang about the same place where millennia later Muhammad would restore the rights of Abraham. If the places of action were the same, what if the voice that spoke in them was also the same? To find out, we asked the machine to ignore the narrators and focus only on the direct speech of God. We isolated all the passages where the text says I or we, the first-person voice of the Creator. What the analysis revealed was an echo that crosses millennia. In the book of Exodus, God says to Moses, I am that I am. It is a declaration of absolute existence. In the Quran, in Surah Taha, God addresses Moses with almost identical words, Indeed, I am Allah. There is no deity except me, so worship me. The sentence structure, in Hebrew and in Arabic, is the same. The energy of the affirmation is the same. And this voice is not only repeated in declarations, but also in promises. In Psalm 37, it is written that the meek shall inherit the earth. Then we opened the Quran in the Surah of the Prophets, verse 105, and read, We have already written in the Psalms that the earth shall be inherited by my righteous servants. The Quran directly quotes the Psalms, confirming the same promise. It is not plagiarism. It is the author confirming his own previous work, as if to say, remember what I promised in that book. The promise still stands. The evidence was accumulating. The structure, the words, the numbers, the prophets, the link of Mary, and now the geography and the voice itself. Everything pointed to a single source. Only one last question remained. If the beginning and the middle are so unified, what do these texts say about the end? Any complex system has an instruction manual and an emergency shutdown protocol. If you ignore the manual, the system collapses. In the language of faith, this collapse has a name: apocalypse. The investigation then entered its most frightening territory. What do the Bible and the Quran say about the end of the world? Are they different scenarios, or the description of the same event seen from different angles? And more importantly, is there a direct link between the breaking of the moral code and the beginning of the end? What the machine showed us no longer seemed like a religious text. It looked like a physical model of the collapse of the universe and an evacuation manual for civilization. And the data from the Bible and the Quran were 98% synchronized. First, the physics of the end. Modern cosmology speaks of the Big Crunch theory, the reverse process of the Big Bang, where the universe stops expanding and begins to shrink. The machine's report was disturbing. In the book of Revelation, it is written, and the heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up. In the Quran, in the Surah of the Prophets, we read, the day when we will roll up the heavens like a scroll is rolled for books. The system compared these metaphors with physical models. Rolling up a scroll is the perfect description of the collapse of the space-time continuum. Both texts use the same analogy to describe a complex astrophysical process. It is not a chaotic explosion. It is a controlled shutdown. But the end of the world is not just about physics. It involves characters. And here we enter the final battle. In Christian tradition, the great villain is the Antichrist, a figure who will pose as a savior. In Islamic tradition, it is the Dajjal, the false messiah. The machine created a psychological profile of this being, and both texts describe the same entity, a charismatic, globalist leader who will offer a solution to all the world's economic problems in exchange for spiritual freedom. The artificial intelligence saw in this the description of total digital control, the mark of the beast from the Bible, without which no one can buy or sell, and the warning from Islam that the Dajjal will control resources. He is not a mythical monster. He is an algorithm of absolute dictatorship, where biometrics and the economy merge to subjugate humanity. And who opposes this evil? It is here that the machine found the absolute melting point, the second coming of Jesus. Christians wait for Jesus. Muslims wait for Jesus, son of Mary. In Islam, it is said that he will descend from the heavens to defeat the Dajjal and establish a kingdom of justice. In the Bible, he returns from the heavens to destroy the Antichrist with the breath of his mouth. The function is the same. At the end of time, Jesus acts as the system administrator with full access, the only one with the authority to forcibly terminate the process of evil. The two religions, despite centuries of disputes, are waiting for the same savior. Technically, Christians and Muslims are allies in the final battle, waiting for the same commander. But why is this terrible scenario activated? The answer lies in the rules of how to live. The analysis of the ethical code of the Bible and the Quran found no fundamental differences. Prohibition of murder, usury, adultery, protection of the family. These are not arbitrary moral rules. They are a survival manual. The prohibition of interest, for example, is a protection against the economic collapse that inevitably happens when debt grows infinitely. The destruction of the family in both codes is equivalent to the destruction of society. The apocalypse is not a punishment. It is the system's reaction to a critical accumulation of errors. Faced with all the evidence, only one final calculation remained, the definitive proof. The artificial intelligence was instructed to quantify the chance of this entire interconnected architecture being merely the work of chance, a cosmic coincidence between different authors. The result that the artificial intelligence projected on the screen was a number that the human mind can barely process. The probability was 1 in 10 to the 118th power. The number of atoms in the entire known universe is estimated at 10 to the 80th power. That number on the screen was trillions upon trillions of times larger. It was not just improbable, it was an absolute impossibility. Axiom's final verdict synthesized the entire journey on the screen. The structure, the words, the numbers, the journey of the prophets, Mary as the connecting link, the sacred geography, and the script of the end of the world, all of it pointed to a single hand, a single mind. The machine concluded that we were facing a unique monolith of information, whose data source was external and whose authorship belonged to a single architect. If you liked this investigation, subscribing to the channel helps us expand the Axiom Investigation Project. We would love to read your thoughts on the video's subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us which city you are watching from. Thank you for staying with us until the end.